over as the head coach, what we said is, that 250-mile radius around Clemson, wherever that takes us, is where we need to spend a large amount of our time. And obviously, that's going to cover the state of South Carolina as our home state, but that also gets into a good bit of Georgia, and then it gets you into a nice area in North Carolina. And anybody that can get in their car and get to Clemson within 3 or 4 hours, then your chances of signing them go up immensely. And I know the question has come up about, the state of Georgia, and did we go back and make it a bigger emphasis? And, my answer to that is Clemson attracts a certain type of young man, and sometimes in that class, for the needs that you have, the Clemson type of players may all be particularly in one state. The next year they may be in North Carolina or they may be in Florida. So it's not where our coaches go back at the end of the year and look and say, man, we didn't sign anybody in this state. Let's just go spend a month in this state in the spring and see who we can find. It's really, at the end of the day, it's about finding the right fit for the needs that you have for that class, and then also the right fit for our program. And that's something that Coach Sweeney and our entire staff take a lot of pride in. Is, we don't have a perfect team, but we got a team full of great young men that have character and goal-oriented, and they want to do right. And I don't know if that's everywhere in college football these days. So it's our job as we go out on the road to be sure that the young men that we bring back to this team are going to have a positive influence on our team and not a negative one.
That type of guy that Clemson attracts, what's that type of guy like?
Yeah, I would say number one, his family is important to him. And he may not live with both his mother and his father. He may live with his grandparents, but spending time with family is important to him. I think that his academics are important to him. He sees value in going to class and getting an education, and he has goals. He wants to. He's focused. He knows what he wants. They just got a good core strand to them. If I went through each of these guys that are up here, I could describe each one of them. Just basically, the word is character. And that doesn't mean that the guys that go out of the other places are bad people or anything like that or don't have character. But I think if you track our recruiting and see who's, I can go on the road and meet a young man or have him come on campus, and within 2 or 3 minutes I can say we're going to have a great shot at this young man, or you know what, he's not our kind of guy. And there's nothing wrong with that, but that's just kind of where Clemson's a unique place. Coach Sweeney is a unique head coach, and he's kind of got some unique philosophies and foundations to this program. And there's unique type of young men and families that are attracted to that. Mylan Richard is a guy that comes to mind. Obviously, the first thing that you hear about is Herschel Walker's nephew plays in Savannah. That's the first thing you hear. And so as you go and do more research and get down there, all I knew that Herschel was his uncle. I didn't know that his mom and dad also ran track at Georgia, and his mom was the first female track athlete to be put on scholarship at Georgia, probably because she was 1 year older than Herschel Walker. And so once I heard all that information, I felt like I just wasted 4.5 hours of my time driving to Savannah, and I wish somebody would have told me that over the phone. And then after I had a conversation with Mylan for the very first time, I was very honest and upfront, and I told him, hey, I've been doing this for a few years, and I really don't need to practice recruit. And so if that's probably where you're going to end up, no harm, no foul, I'll shake your hand and we'll move on. And he said, no, Coach, I want to go through the process, and I've talked about it with my family, and Clemson's somewhere I'm very excited about. And if it's the place for me, then they're going to support me. And once they came on campus and we had a chance to sit down with his mom and dad, I mean, they just ooze character about them. And his dad's a State Farm agent there in Savannah. And I knew once they came up here for the first time that we were going to have a great shot with him, because I knew what they were looking for in a school, and I knew what we had to offer. And so the more time they spent here, the better our chances would be. And so, you know, it's sometimes maybe it's hard to describe, but there's definitely a distinct characteristics to the type of young men that are attracted to Clemson.
Can you talk about the 4 receivers you signed that you're going to be able to work with?
Yeah, sure. First of all, I'll talk about the one that's not here because sometimes they get left out. Trevion Thompson out of Durham Hillside is a guy that we've followed for a long time, probably going on 2 years. Very athletic, and is a guy that we think can help us in the boundary position, the same position that DeAndre Hopkins, Martavis Bryant, Mike Williams is currently playing. He's a guy that, you know, we think can stretch the field. He's got good ball skills, and we're excited about him. And then here on campus now, Kyron Priester, who signed in last class and took a pit stop there at Fork Union. He's a little bit older, and physically you can tell that. He's a little bit more maybe physically mature than your average freshman coming in. And we're looking for big things out of him, and he can play several different positions. Damari Kitt is someone we're very excited about. Comes from a great program, Sandy Creek High School in Georgia, you know, home with Calvin Johnson, and I mean, he's the head coach there, does an excellent job. Chip Walker, when they've been very successful. So he's been coached extremely well. He's a great route runner, understands the game, just kind of has that it factor, and someone that we've recruited hard from the very beginning. And then Artavius Scott, you know, I'm very excited about him. He's one that, you know, we didn't have a lot of just great ties to initially in the process. And when you go down to Florida and try to take maybe what we would consider the top receiver in the state of Florida out of Florida, sometimes you have to have those ties. And we had that with Sammy. My dad's relationship with one of the coaches there at South Fort Myers really helped us get in a good spot early on with Sammy in his 9th grade year. And with Artavius, we didn't have that. But he came to Clemson in the summer and spent 3 days at Clemson. And all of a sudden, I think we went from around 4 or 5 on his list with probably the in-state schools ahead of us to number 1. And 2 weeks later, he committed. And so I think that speaks a lot, again, to what I was saying. If we can just get them here and get them around Coach Sweeney and get them around our players, then, you know, there's a group of guys that are really attracted to that. But I think Artavius is very talented, and it'll be a lot of fun with those 3 guys this spring. I hope I'm up here talking in 3 or 4 years from now about how we're going to replace, you know, the guys that we're signing right now.
What was the impact of having Thad on putting together this recruiting class, and then even as you put together 2015, just personally taking some of that responsibility away from you?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is now with all of the social media, with all of the graphics, you know, they've changed some of the rules as far as what you can send out to these guys. It just opens up so many different things that you can do. And so, and now here you are, you're recruiting 3 classes because, you know, up until today, we've been recruiting the 2014 class, 2015, and then, you know, there's probably an elite group of about 20 2016 guys that we're actively recruiting. And so when you have 3 full classes, you need somebody to help you kind of get all that organized and being sure that the guys that are able to get mail and pictures and graphics and videos and all that, what is your plan with that? And I would say probably 3 or 4 years ago, that was easier for a on-the-field coach to be able to do that. And but now, because they've allowed you to do so much more stuff for the recruits as far as information you can give them, and because you're recruiting a broader group of recruits with 3 classes, it really helps having someone off the field. And then also Thad does a great job of communicating with the different people on campus, communicating with our athletic department about needs and things that we have. And so just having someone that can be watching that on a daily basis, and that's his one job, is a huge advantage. You know, for something as simple as in the past, I've always been the one in charge of the school plane, and there's a process if you set up where you're going and to schedule out coaches to be able to use the school plane. Well, you know, in the past, I've been the guy that's had to kind of to run through the paperwork to get all that done, and sometimes I'd have to step out of a school to organize plane flights and all these things going on with our school plane. And now Thad's sitting right here at home base and can take care of all that, and it takes that off my shoulders where I can go into schools and spend time with coaches.
What's
Sammy and Martavis being gone this year, and you obviously the wide receiver coach, how important, how much of an emphasis was that for you guys to get good talent like you got this year in the class?
I mean, we knew, and I've said it earlier today, I believe on the radio, if we waited till after the Orange Bowl in the locker room to figure out how we were going to replace Sammy and Martavis, we'd be in trouble. We knew, I knew after Sammy's first practice that he wasn't going to be around here very long. But I think whenever they're here having success, you're able to use that success to recruit other young men, that are juniors in high school. And so we did a really good job of, first thing you have to do is identify who are the top guys that you want, to come in if you could have your first pick. And once you identify those guys, it's to spend a lot of time and to show them, how they can come in behind those guys and hopefully have opportunities to break their records. And so it was something we knew going into this season and going into this cycle that this was going to be a big year for us from a recruiting perspective. And, I think we've had 3 of our last 4 wideouts that have left were all third-year players that went on to, be pretty highly drafted guys. So, that there's obviously positives in that, and that they're having a lot of success here and they're able to go and have a good future at the next level. But there's also a negative that you only get them for 3 seasons. And so we got to continue to stay ahead of that curve and, give Coach Morris and Coach Sweeney all the weapons they need to have success.
If there was one rule in the recruiting rule book, I guess, which one would you change? Which one do you think?
I think that the biggest rule is the bump rule. I think it's the only rule in the rule book, in my opinion, that's gray. That when you go to a school and a prospect walks up to you, that you can shake his hand and tell him that you can't talk to him. And what some people define as a bump, may be a 5-minute conversation sitting down in the coach's office, and what others define as a bump is literally bumping into them, shaking their hand, and saying good luck. And so I think it puts a lot of people in difficult situations sometimes, because, if you're flying down to go to a school to recruit a young man, that coach and that young man, that coach is going to want that prospect to meet you. And so I just don't think it puts coaches in a good situation. I think there's definitely some talk among the head coaches, who are at that level of making decisions, that maybe there could be some changes made to that, because I don't think the bump rule is keeping up with the recruiting calendar, where basically now you're recruiting juniors in December and January of their junior year, and technically you can't have contact with a prospect until around December 1st of his senior year. Well, 90% of your recruiting is already over by the time that you can physically go down and talk to them. And so I think the NCAA is looking at maybe moving that back and allowing us to have contact with them in person at the school a little bit earlier, which will put, I think, everybody in a better position.
What